following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
Hello and welcome to this brand new edition of Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Our focus continues to be on the Israel-Hamas war, and of course we have a complete lowdown for you on the musical chairs that's happening in British politics. First, our big focus. It is day 38 of the Israel-Hamas war, and the World Health Organization has warned of a dire and perilous situation at Gaza's main medical facility, the Al-Shifa hospital, which is experiencing a near complete power outage and acute shortages of food and water. WHO Chief Tedros Ghebreyesus has said constant gunfire and bombings in the area around the hospital have exacerbated the already critical circumstances, and that Al-Shifa is not functioning as a hospital anymore. In fact, the World Health Organization has also said that every 10 minutes a child is being killed in Gaza. The Israeli military says it is ready to help evacuate dozens of vulnerable newborn babies from here to another hospital. Al-Shifa's head of surgery, Dr. Marwan Abu Sada, has said a third premature newborn baby has died because of a lack of power. And as dozens of other newborns are currently not receiving the care they need, he said, we're afraid we're going to lose all the babies. Israel says Hamas has its headquarters underneath Al-Shifa. Hamas denies using the hospital for military purposes. Dr. Abu Sada described Israel's allegation as a big lie and issued an open invitation to its nearby forces to come and inspect the building. Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry has issued an update about the situation at Al-Shifa, saying there are at least 2,300 people still inside the hospital, 1,500 of whom are displaced people who have sought shelter there. The World Health Organization has repeated its call for an immediate ceasefire and the active protection of civilians and healthcare. Israeli forces reached the gates of Gaza City's main hospital today. It's now the primary target in their battle to seize control of northern Gaza, where medics say patients, including newborn babies, are dying for lack of fuel. Israel claims they offered fuel to Al-Shifa hospital, but Hamas turned down the offer. The hospital says they have received no fuel at all from the Israelis. Meanwhile, in a significant statement, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has told US media that a deal could be in the works to free hostages held by Hamas in Gaza, but declined to provide any details for fear of scuttling the potential plan. Netanyahu said, and I quote, "We heard that there was an impending deal of this kind or that kind, and then we learned that it was all hokum. But the minute we started the ground operation, that began to change." Asked whether there's a potential deal to free more of the hostages, Netanyahu replied, "There could be," and added, "I think the less I say about it, the more I'll increase the chances that it will materialize." Close to 250 hostages are being held captive in Gaza. But Netanyahu maintains that a ceasefire is out of the question without the release of the hostages. A Palestinian official in Gaza laid the blame for inaction at Netanyahu's doorstep. The official told AFP on condition of anonymity, and I quote, "Netanyahu is responsible for the delay and obstacles in reaching a preliminary agreement on the release of several prisoners. He's not interested in finding them alive. He's only concerned with preserving his own political future." Netanyahu also addressed the issue of Gaza's hospitals, which have become trapped in the fighting, and in particular Al-Shifa, the Hamas-run territory's largest hospital, which authorities say faces a catastrophic situation. In fact, they say there is no reason, Netanyahu in fact said there is no reason why we can't get the patients out of there. We're telling them to leave, and in fact, we're helping them by creating safe corridors through which patients and others can evacuate to areas of less intense fighting in southern Gaza. There is also growing concern that this war could spread beyond Gaza, with an upsurge of clashes on Israel's northern border with Lebanon and the United States launching airstrikes on Iran-linked militia targets in neighboring Syria. Israel launched its campaign last month to annihilate Hamas, which runs the Gaza Strip. This after Hamas terrorists rampaged through southern Israel, killing at least 1,200 people, most of them civilians. This was the deadliest attack in Israel's 75-year history. Since then, at least 11,200 Gazans have been killed in the Israeli counter-offensive. 40% of them were children, and more than half of the population has been rendered homeless.
Sadly, the health system in Gaza is collapsing, and we are following very, very closely the developments around hospitals, especially Shifa hospital. Shifa is an iconic hospital in Gaza. It is always the hospital that continues to function across the wars. Yesterday, the Director General of the World Health Organization declared that for the last 3 days, Shifa has not received water and electricity and has stopped operating. And that is extremely, extremely dramatic. We're talking about 1.6 million people displaced in Gaza out of a total population of 2.2 million. With the opening of these corridors from the north of the Gaza Strip to the south, we've seen several thousand people walking out of these corridors on foot. They come and join all the displaced people in our schools. Our schools are really overcrowded, so we are looking at ways where we can continue to assist the displaced, but at the same time, not expose them to diseases, outbreak of diseases that are caused by the overcrowding and the lack of hygiene.
All hospitals in Gaza City and in the north have gone out of service, except for Al-Shifa Medical Complex and the Indonesian hospital, which are still being directly targeted. These hospitals are the only ones left for thousands of wounded in the Gaza Strip. The catastrophic situation in Al-Shifa Medical Complex is worsening, and any moving soul within the hospital grounds is being targeted, making it impossible to enter or leave the hospital. There is no safe passage, neither from the western nor the eastern side of Al-Shifa Medical Complex. Garbage and medical waste are piling up in the Al-Shifa hospital, and there is no water available in the hospital's wards or toilets. These conditions, combined with power cuts, pose a real risk of death to all the patients, medical staff, and displaced people, estimated to be more than 2,500 individuals sheltering in the grounds of Al-Shifa Medical Complex. I appeal to the United Nations and the European Union to parachute aid into Gaza, especially in the north, as has been done many times around the world. We call for the opening of 8 corridors in Gaza, not limited to the Rafah crossing. I say to the Israeli Prime Minister, who opposes the return of authority to Gaza and wants to maintain the occupation for a long time, that his policy will bring misfortune to them. Gaza is a part of Palestine, which has been occupied since 1967, and we don't need anyone's permission to help our people there. The fact that Israel is making Al-Shifa Hospital the capital of Gaza, and that its fall means the fall of Gaza, is nothing but a justification for killing the wounded, the sick, the doctors, and the paramedics.
All right, so to dissect the major developments of the Israel-Hamas war of the last 48 hours, let's now go across to our panel of experts. Joining me live on the show tonight is Itay Melchior, research and advisor, Middle East and Africa Affairs and former executive at the Israeli National Security Council. He joins us live from Haifa in Israel. Also with us is Lev Aaron, Israeli columnist and journalist. He's former coordinator of the India-Israel Parliamentary Friendship League. And completing the panel tonight is Major General Ashwini Sivaj, defense and geopolitical expert, who joins us from New Delhi. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Itay Melchior, if I could start with you. I hope I've got the pronunciation of your name correct. Let's begin with this very interesting statement that's been made by the Israeli Prime Minister in his interviews to the US media. He says he is hopeful, or at least he's hinted, that there might be a deal in the works to secure the release of the close to 250 hostages who are currently being held captive by Hamas in Gaza. Now, fact of the matter is that thus far we've seen a stalemate, with Hamas saying call a ceasefire and perhaps we can talk about releasing the hostages. and Israel saying no question of a ceasefire until the safe release of all the hostages. Therefore, when the Prime Minister hints at a possible deal to secure the release of the hostages, what do you think we might be looking at here?
Well, the issue is a bit more complicated than this, because we have to remember that not all hostages are held by Hamas. Some of them are held by Islamic Jihad. Some of them are even held by, let's call it, private families, crime families or syndicates. So it's a very complex negotiation that we're looking at. Of course, Israel values every life, and Israel's stance is, of course, the unconditional release of those hostages. I don't think the Prime Minister or anybody else involved will elaborate on the talks right now, but we know more or less from looking at the media and looking at different jets flying back and forth who the players are when it comes to negotiation, Qatar, Egypt, and we have to remember that there are also many multinationals in this. There are people from several dozen countries who are held captive. There are British citizens and US citizens and French citizens and much more. So you have to remember that many of those countries who have their citizens also taken captive are also somewhat involved, or at least applying pressure.
Most certainly. In fact, I think it is very well known that the Americans have been involved in backroom negotiations almost since the beginning of this war, as is Qatar. But of course, we'll have to wait and see how this pans out, because the stakes for Israel in this war are extremely high. And even as you talk about wanting to wipe Hamas off the face of the planet, one of the top priorities remains the safe release of these hostages. And as you mentioned, while most of them are Israelis, there are people of multiple nationalities, including Americans. All right, let me go across to Lev Aaron at this point. Lev, it is, I think, pretty safe to say that in recent weeks, Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli government have come under growing international pressure, given the increasing number of killings of Palestinians in Gaza. According to the latest figures, at least 11,200 Palestinians have been killed in the Israeli counteroffensive, and we are told more than 4,500 of them were children. Yet, the Prime Minister maintains there is no question of a ceasefire. But what do you make of a series of interviews that he's given to the US media over the weekend, where he says we're not going to agree to a ceasefire, but we're negotiating a deal for the safe return of all the hostages? You know, how, according to you, are some of his statements being received back at home? Is this some sort of damage control by the Prime Minister at a time when he's under growing pressure, not just from the international community, but some might agree even from his closest ally, the United States?
Okay, first of all, I'm honored to be hosted here. You can hear me well?
We can, and it is great to have you back. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I think we have to start with our Desi-Israeli politics. We cannot run away from the Desi-Israeli politics, because the reason that Netanyahu gives interviews to the foreign channels and not to the Israeli channels is because he will be grilled by the Israeli Desi channels. Everybody is angry about Netanyahu because Netanyahu is considered to be like the father of the concept that Hamas could be contained for like more than a decade. So naturally, he will go to any American or British or even Indian news channel and not to an Israeli channel. So this is about our like internal politics. The second thing is the same internal politics, domestic politics, does not allow any result except defeating the Hamas totally. And even today, there is not a single pollster who gives Netanyahu a chance to being again a prime minister if, let's say, elections are tomorrow. Okay? We know they are not tomorrow. So if there is one consensus in Israel, it is not about the outcome after we defeat the Hamas. The only consensus in Israel, the bipartisan consensus in Israel, is that we have to defeat the Hamas. Hamas cannot stay in power in Gaza, even if they are in a hospital, even if when you try to kill a Hamas militant, maybe you kill other people who hate Hamas. We know what the prices are. But I don't think there is any outcome right now in Israel that is not winning the Hamas and make them even understand that they were defeated by Israel after the humiliation of what Israel went through just 1 month back.
Well, you've made a series of very, very important and interesting points, Lev. You are saying that there are many who believe that Netanyahu may be to some extent responsible for what's happened to Israel in the first place. There are many theories, one of which suggests that, he did in fact support Hamas indirectly for a very long time because he wanted to create a divide amongst the Palestinians, and maybe Israel is paying a very big price for that policy that Netanyahu pursued for a very long time. And not only is he, is his unpopularity growing across the globe, there is a lot of anger directed at Netanyahu at home, and it looks very unlikely that he will be re-elected to office. Also, you say that he is avoiding talking to media in Israel because he will be asked some very tough and uncomfortable questions. He would rather talk to the foreign media. You mentioned the Indian media. I certainly hope that he will agree to talk to us at some point. Let me expand on some of those points that you've made with our next guest, Lev. Major General Ashwini Sivach is with us as well. Sir, address this for us, that even as this war goes on, fact of the matter is that many would say that it is getting more and more difficult for Prime Minister Netanyahu because there is growing international pressure on him to call a ceasefire. And it's not just from humanitarian agencies, it is not just from the United Nations, it's not just from the Arab world. Many believe that even the Biden administration, his closest ally, is now increasingly uncomfortable being seen in Israel's corner, given how the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza is worsening by the day. And on top of that, there is anger in Israel at home directed at the Prime Minister, because there are some who believe that he perhaps to some extent created a Frankenstein monster in Hamas. But given how the war is proceeding, as an army man, how do you perceive this war, sir, given how it's currently poised? And, with Israelis saying constantly, the only way this can end is if we wipe out Hamas and achieve a major victory. Can they really wipe out Hamas completely? Can there be a complete victory for Israel in this war?
Absolutely. See, Neha, 2 points, you have raised it very clearly. First of all, we must understand what were the military objective of Israel when they have gone inside Gaza. The two aim were, one was basically to destroy the military capability of Hamas, and the second one was to get the hostages released. Now, as far as the first aim is concerned, that the Israelis have managed, the Israeli Defense Forces have managed to almost crush the Hamas to 70 to 80%. But still there are a lot to be done. Until and unless they are not able to completely destroy the military capability of Hamas in Gaza, they are not going to stop, because that was the first and foremost aim. Otherwise, Hamas will grow again. Not that it will take time, it can grow again within a stipulated time. So therefore, as far as Israel is concerned, they have no choice but to destroy Hamas military capability. And Hamas very cleverly has made use of hospitals, schools, mosques, from where they are fighting. They have a tunnel defenses. So it's a difficult task for Israel defense forces to completely destroy Hamas. But I suppose they have done a very good job professionally. The way they have got systematically, everyone thought that the Israelis are going to have a lot of casualties, especially fighting in built-up area and tunnel defense. But then they have managed to ensure that their casualties are minimum, and the Hamas capability to fight a war is almost nullified. But what it comes, the problem is, what about the future of hostages? Now, the hostages is one thing which is basically, you can say, can bring down Israel's, will to fight. Now, what will happen to this more than 240 hostages? Is there any back channel diplomacy going on? Is there any way to release these hostages? Because till the hostages are not released, Israel is not going to agree on ceasefire, and rightfully so. Rightfully so, because in case if you break this momentum, the Hamas will get it again recouped and fight it again the other day. So therefore, the question is how do they get the hostage released? I suppose back channel diplomacy is going in Qatar. To me, it looks like that there is a chances of those prisoners of Palestinians which are there in Israel jail, they may do swapping with that. But then certainly they will like these 240 hostages to be come back, including almost 15 to 20 foreign nationals. So that is the main thing. As far as the military objective of destroying Hamas is concerned, as on today, that aim they are fulfilling. To say that they can never destroy Hamas completely may not be totally correct, because militarily you sort of destroy its capability of not striking again in a future time. And that's what they are trying to do. As far as the casualties are concerned, they are very keen that the minimum casualty should take place. As far as Palestinians are concerned, collateral damage should be less, and that's why they have opened 2 corridors moving from north to south. What is happening is the Hamas is not letting the Palestinian civilians to move because they want to use it as human shield. So this is the catch-22 situation for Israel. As far as the military is concerned, they are going in a professional manner, but the casualties are increasing. And as the time passes by, as the casualty of Palestine increase, it is disadvantage to Israel, because the sympathy of the whole world then goes toward the Palestine, and also the people start pointing out finger at Israel, and that they forget what happened on 7th October. As far as domestically now Netanyahu is concerned, I suppose the whole country is with him fighting against Hamas. What will happen after this war, the time will only tell. But I, for one, feel that militarily Israel is going in a very professional manner, and they have managed to almost put a dent or destroy the military capability of Hamas almost 70 to 80%. And they have surrounded Gaza city, and the work which he left is not of surmounting.
I still wonder though if they can, enter the tunnels with so much ease. That might be the toughest part of this war for Israel, navigating those, the maze of those underground tunnels. I'll come back to you, Major General, but let me go back to our Israeli guest. Of course, Major General Ashwini Savas made an interesting point there, that there is a strong possibility that the release of the hostages could be secured in return for the release of some Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails. I doubt our Israeli guest will confirm or deny this. So, Itai Melchior, I will ask you another question instead. There are just too many claims and counterclaims being made by the two sides, as has been the case since the beginning of this war. Now, you have Israel saying, the Prime Minister saying, we offered fuel to Al-Shifa hospital. It is Hamas that turned down the offer. Al-Shifa hospital says we never received any fuel from Israel. In fact, you now have the World Health Organization saying the biggest hospital in Gaza is no longer functional. This is a catastrophe. Enough is enough. Call a ceasefire. Then, you have people, including the United States, saying to Israel, do not target healthcare infrastructure. And yet Israel goes ahead and targets Al-Shifa hospital, saying that is because this hospital houses Hamas's military infrastructure. The question is, I think, even as there is growing outrage over the killings of Palestinians, people are also increasingly confused in this fog of war about whom to believe.
Yes, you have very long questions there. Let me just actually start with the last part of your question. There's one side that has been proven every time and not to tell the truth. We saw the bombing of a hospital in the first week of the war, which Hamas blamed Israel for. It's since then been proven beyond any doubt. All the countries, all the media outlets who have looked into the footage have confirmed that it was not Israel. Hamas keeps saying it was Israel. So we can assume which side is a free democracy with free press that is telling the truth and which side is not telling the truth. We've heard recordings of Hamas people telling hospitals they're coming to take some of their fuel. So I think that it doesn't look good, of course, when a hospital is targeted. But when this hospital is a base and there are several underground floors and facilities, specifically in Shifa hospital, it's a known fact, which house terrorists. And there's a very simple way to end this targeting of hospitals, not targeting the hospital or patients, but what is going on there. The easy way is for Hamas to give up arms, to surrender, to return the hostages. You cannot hide inside a hospital and then cry foul when this hospital is being targeted. This is a war crime committed by Hamas, besides the war crimes that they have perpetually been doing, targeting Israeli civilians, not only on October 7th, but all the rockets they fire are targeted at civilians. The fact that Israel has Iron Dome and other capabilities that help save Israeli lives does not diminish the fact that Hamas and other terrorist organizations keep firing into Israeli civilian areas, even from the north. Other proxies of Iran, Hezbollah, has been killing Israeli civilians in the north and targeting civilian towns. So really the crying foul about the hospital when the other side is not doing anything for humanitarian cause, even not letting the Red Cross visit the hostages. So I really believe that if we want to play fair, then the burden should be on Hamas, not on Israel, which has been trying hard. And by the way, the Shifa hospital manager also said that they didn't accept the fuel because it wasn't enough. So he can't, they're changing their lies throughout. They keep broadcasting that they're out of fuel, but you see the lights running in the hospitals when ambulances are arriving. So really everything needs to be taken not with a pinch of salt, but with a truckload of salt.
Truckloads that are hard to come by in Gaza. Pardon me for my pun, but to be fair, it's not just Al-Shifa authorities. Even though the World Health Organization is on record as saying these hospitals are not functioning anymore. But Mr. Melchior, I want to ask you another couple of questions.
Yeah, just on this, sorry, you're saying the World Health Organization is getting its facts from inside Gaza. I remind you that last week there was a serious research done and shown that many of the journalists who are working for the Western media outlets, I'm not talking about the Hezbollah or the Hamas news outlets, and not even Al Jazeera, I'm talking about CNN and other channels. All their reporting is done by locals, and it's been shown that some of them were even part of the October 7 events and participated and were there with the troops. So really, again, going back to your previous question, it's a bit difficult to trust these reports. And remember that this is what the world is relying on, because we don't have any objective or free press in Gaza and haven't had since Hamas came to power.
Okay, I thought the UN aid workers were present on the ground. They certainly have been at the Rafah crossing. But let me ask you a different question now, before I go across to the other guests. You heard Lev Aaron, a fellow Israeli, talk about how much anger there is at home towards Netanyahu. What do you make of the fact that there are some who are now beginning to call Hamas Prime Minister Netanyahu's Frankenstein monster?
Listen, I was part of the security mechanism of Israel in some of the relevant period. And I think that part of this concept, it was well put by the previous head of the National Security Council that served under the current opposition, under Lapid and Bennett government, who said that even at retrospect, it seems the right decision to focus on what's happening on Iran and to try and keep a lid on what's happening in Gaza. Remember, Hamas was elected by the Palestinians, and it's almost, if you want to be a democracy, the legitimate leadership. We don't even know what will happen tomorrow if there are elections in the West Bank, which the Palestinian Authority has been avoiding for more than a decade, because the fear is that Hamas will come to power. So remember that when you are dealing with Hamas, you can't just let's say if 2 months ago Netanyahu had gone to war against Gaza and Hamas, and what we're doing today we would have done 2 months ago, the world would have been at outrage, and foreign militaries would have come to fight against Israel. So it's very easy in retrospect, and hindsight is always. But at the time, this was the accepted theory in the security mechanism, in the different governments that have been in that period, not only Netanyahu. Again, retrospect, you can say it was a mistake, but then I would ask those saying so, okay, what is your proposal then? Would you have gone to war 2 years ago against Hamas out of the blue? Would you have stopped the money, which most of it goes to humanitarian causes? So that is a very big question, and it's a bit of an easy way out to, in retrospect, come and say you shouldn't have done this.
Okay, but you know, going to war is one thing. Being accused of indirectly and tacitly supporting an organization is quite another. And I think you've cleverly evaded my question there on Netanyahu's culpability in all of this. But I have one more question for you before I move on to Lev Aaron, which is this. You know that there is growing anger around the world. The Israelis are today being accused of carrying out a genocide of Palestinians. These are not my words. This is something that a lot of people around the world are saying. How much longer do you think Israel can withstand this pressure, given that poll after poll seems to suggest that even the Biden administration, Netanyahu's closest ally, is now increasingly uncomfortable, being seen in Israel's corner as more and more killings take place in Gaza?
Okay, so just to answer the previous question, though, because I don't avoid questions, even difficult ones, Netanyahu has said that he is part to blame in his government, and because he was, the mere fact that he was in power means that he is to blame. Again, I'm sure that after the war there will be a commission of inquiry, and there's so much blame to go around that he will get his portion of blame, as will others, and therefore I share the view that he will not keep being prime minister for long. I don't know exactly the mechanism, but that is the common thought in Israel. To your question, it's a good question. Every time there's been a round, let's call it, in Gaza, the question was always how long a window does Israel have to operate? I think that it's true that the harsh pictures that are coming out and the lives lost, and every life is a tragedy, play a part. Israel is trying very, very hard not to create a big mega event. For example, the easy way out to solve the issue with the Hamas tunnels under Shifa hospital is to just make this hospital go away. Israel will not do that. And it's trying very hard not to do so also by mistake, and using very precise and chirurgical equipment, trying not to do, because we know that very, very harsh scenes are going to make it very hard for Israel to continue. That said, and as the general said earlier, this is still a long way to go, because remember, yes, we have control of big parts of overground Gaza, but there's a whole underground Gaza, and that is Gaza City. Then you have the southern part of the Gaza Strip, Rafah, and other cities there, and Khan Yunis. And of course, there are militants there, and there are military capabilities there. And we have a high density of population there because of the hundreds of thousands who have evacuated Gaza City to the south. So it's a big question how long Israel can continue. And I think that is the reason why it's, on the one hand, going strong, but also going as careful as can be under these circumstances.
All right, Mr. Melchior, I must say, I certainly appreciate your willingness to answer all my questions. Let me now go across to Lev Aaron at this point. Lev, let me put the same question to you. Many would argue that the so-called window of legitimacy for the Israeli counter-offensive against Hamas and Gaza closed a while ago. How much longer do you think Israel can withstand this growing international pressure, the fact that it now runs the risk of being dangerously isolated, the fact that the Biden administration will also find it hard after a point to explain this policy back home to their own supporters. Apparently, there are polls in America that suggest that many Democrats are opposed to the Biden administration's policy of offering unstinting support to Israel. This is something that could perhaps come back to haunt President Biden in next year's presidential election. Or do you believe that Netanyahu is just so focused on his political survival that he simply doesn't care about what the world thinks and how much growing outrage there may be against Israel right now?
I will start with Netanyahu. Netanyahu is the prime minister. He is a brother of a martyred officer in Israel. I don't think that when he thinks about the war, it is only through the narrow lens of politics, okay? I think also Netanyahu, as well as the other ministers, they understand that we are now speaking about history, not only about politics. The pace of the war is not because of Netanyahu, not even Defense Minister Gallant. The pace of the war is because the army, the Air Force, the Navy, everybody is asking the politicians to let the army move slowly, to do things in a slow way, not to create a situation when many Palestinians are getting killed if they are not the Hamas terrorists. And they are the ones who are asking for the oxygen and to let as much time as possible to be inside Gaza and to give the Israelis a real defeat over Hamas. And I agree, we have the tunnels and we have South Gaza. Of course, the main political structure and also military structure of Hamas is in North Gaza, also in the hospital, in Shifa hospital. But still, it is not that the mission is finished when we beat Hamas on the ground. We still will need to go to get underground. So the mission has a time. The second thing is that Israel can hear the double talk that you and I do not hear. The things that the Palestinian Authority is saying outside is not what the Palestinian Authority or the Emirates or the Saudis are telling the Israeli government when they are sitting in closed doors. So on one hand, of course, we see the demonstrations. We see the tragedies in the hospitals. We see the lack of water, electricity, and so on. We see so many people who lost their houses. On the other hand, Israeli officials hear the voices that, of course, they are being told only secretly, please finish Hamas. It will be good for you. It will be good for all the Sunni normal countries in the Middle East, not only for Israel.
Okay, one quick question, Lev. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there were some protests in Tel Aviv over the weekend with the protesters saying there should be an immediate ceasefire, do not kill Palestinians in our name. Would you say that is just a microscopic minority and that an overwhelming majority of Israelis actually do support this war?
Yes, I think that all Israelis think that we should give at least, let's say, some prisoners of Hamas, maybe minors, women, and so on, to get back our hostages in Gaza. But on the other hand, I don't think a majority among Israelis think that right now ceasefire is a good thing for Israel. Moreover, I think even those who are like putting the signs of ceasefire now, they know that there are a small minority within Israel. I think they know it crystal clear.
All right. Major General Ashwini Srivastava, wrap up this debate for us. Even though you believe that Israeli forces are on the right track as far as their stated objective of finishing off Hamas is concerned, but how do you think, like a military man, that they're going to navigate, the labyrinth of underground tunnels, for example, and bunkers, and so far we're talking about northern Gaza. Perhaps there is also the rest of Gaza that they need to deal with. And this, as Hamas doesn't seem to run out of ammunition or rockets. It's been 5 weeks now.
Absolutely. See, Neha, there is no doubt. First of all, Israel was surprised and Mossad was also surprised, their intelligence agency, they never came to know that Hamas was preparing for this action for last 2 years. And they have made tunnels which are almost 500 of them, and they are running all through the Gaza. And it is very difficult to basically negotiate the tunnels and get these Hamas out of the tunnel. And if you get into this, then the point comes is your own casualty will increase. But to me, it looks like that the Israel has gone in a very professional manner. They have used sponge bomb and they have used water cannon, and they have managed to get these Hamas out of the tunnel. And they, though it is a difficult operation, it's a built-up area operation, and it is bound to be slow and also a lot of casualty. But I suppose so far Israel has done a good job by ensuring minimum collateral damage, minimum own casualty, and also able to neutralize Hamas and tunnel defenses. I suppose the tunnel defenses to some extent has been destroyed, but it will take some time. The problem is not that. The problem is this war going to finish too soon? The thing is that today Israel is in catch-22 situation. Israel cannot stop the war now in between when Hamas has not been completely destroyed, and there is a pressure coming internationally to have a ceasefire, which they cannot have because the momentum will be broken. And at the same time, the world is getting against it. So the problem is coming that Hamas and now Israel want to finish this operation at the earliest. They are going on the right track, difficult operation, also very difficult to neutralize the tunnel, but they are doing a good job. Where I suppose the Israeli force have faltered is that they have not managed to evacuate the civilians from North Gaza to South Gaza in the first phase of the war. Okay. Now they have opened two corridors that could have avoided of having a civilian casualty. The biggest problem is more than 12,000 Palestinians when they were killed. Yes. That attracts the attention of the whole world.
That is exactly what I wanted to say, sir, that I had only one point of disagreement with you when you said that the Israelis have managed to minimize the casualties, because I do not think they've managed to do that. Fact of the matter is close to 12,000 Palestinians have been killed in the Israeli counter-offensive.
Yeah,
certainly not say that all of them were Hamas. Thousands of them were children, and according to the Americans, the real figure could be much higher than that. Okay, I'm out of time, sir, very quickly.
One. So, Neha, no doubt, what you said rightly, that they could have been more professional in ensuring minimum casualty to civilians. They tried it. I suppose where they faltered is that they should have ensured that the maximum population should have moved from North Gaza to South Gaza, so that the collateral damage would have been a minimum to civil casualty. And okay. I totally agree. If the world is going to go against you, is due to civilian casualty and casualty of children and the women.
And you know, it is really sad when we have to refer to 12,000 human beings as collateral damage, thousands of whom were children. But I'm completely out of time. Therefore, Itai Melchior, Lev Aaron, Major General Ashwini Sivaj, thank you so much for your perspective and time on Global Lens. Thank you very much for joining us. All right. On that note, let's now move on to the other big story of the day. Well, British politics never ceases to fascinate. The game of musical chairs in British politics continues, and in a sensational development, former Prime Minister David Cameron has returned to the British government, this time as Foreign Secretary. This on a day when Prime Minister Rishi Sunak sacked Home Secretary Suella Braverman and shook up his top team ahead of next year's general election. Firebrand Interior Minister Suella Braverman was axed after critics accused her of stoking fresh tensions during weeks of contentious pro-Palestinian demonstrations and counter-protests in Britain. She has been replaced with James Cleverly, who is the Foreign Secretary. The changes are part of Rishi Sunak's first major reshuffle of his top minister since becoming Prime Minister in October last year. The Conservatives in power for nearly 14 years have said these changes will strengthen Sunak's team to deliver long-term decisions for a brighter future. Let's first talk about Suella Braverman and why she lost her job. Braverman had stoked controversy throughout her tenure, taking a hardline stance on immigration, for instance, and regularly wading into culture war issues which are seen as dividing the electorate. But her position became increasingly untenable after last week, when she wrote an explosive newspaper article without Rishi Sunak's approval, accusing the police of bias towards left-wing causes. The article was blamed for stoking tensions ahead of a weekend of protests calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, which coincided with Armistice Day events and prompted calls for her sacking. Critics said her comments had encouraged far-right protesters to hold counter-demonstrations on the sidelines of the main march on Saturday that resulted in dozens of arrests. Downing Street launched an investigation into how this article was published without its consent, as required by the ministerial code. Braverman's comments were also viewed as an attempt to position herself as a future leader of the Tories. Braverman had earlier described the rallies calling for a ceasefire in Gaza as hate marches, days after claiming that some people were homeless as a lifestyle choice. Widely seen as a right-winger, Swela Braverman has attacked her critics as liberal, tofu-eating vocarati. Shortly after she was appointed as Home Secretary, she had said that sending asylum seekers to Rwanda was her dream and obsession. Meanwhile, former Prime Minister David Cameron's unexpected return surprised even the most seasoned of British politics watchers and is being viewed as having been made with the next general election firmly in mind. The Tories have trailed the main Labour opposition by double-digit margins throughout Rishi Sunak's time in power and are widely tipped to lose the electoral context next year. Although he has a high profile and connections around the world, Cameron's appointment may not prove to be a vote winner. Polling in September showed 45% of British adults felt unfavourably towards him, while only around a quarter had a favourable view. Some observers say Sunak was possibly drawn to Cameron's clout on the international stage and that he hopes to appeal to increasingly dissatisfied centrist and centre-right voters. Some have gone as far as to say the move to bring back the former British Prime Minister is a desperate one. 57-year-old Cameron quit as Prime Minister in 2016 after losing the Brexit referendum. He stood down even as a Member of Parliament that year. He became mired in scandal in 2021 after lobbying the UK government for finance group Greensill Capital, which later collapsed, and the episode was seen as badly tarnishing his reputation. Cameron will be made a life peer in the House of Lords, Britain's upper chamber of Parliament. He said today he gladly accepted his new role as Britain faces a daunting set of international challenges. Cameron added, "While I have been out of frontline politics for the last 7 years, I hope that my experience as Conservative leader for 11 years and Prime Minister for 6 will assist me in helping the Prime Minister to meet these vital challenges."
It's been a huge privilege to serve as Foreign Secretary, and in that time I worked very closely with my colleagues in the Home Office, cracking down on illegal migration, reducing the number of small boat arrivals, and now as the Home Secretary I'm absolutely committed to stopping the boats as we promised, but also making sure that everybody in the UK feels safe and secure going about their daily business, knowing that the government is here to protect them. So it's a fantastic job and it's a real privilege to serve.
Well, David Cameron has captured global headlines today, and not without reason. Listen in to what he told Barun Das, the MD and CEO of TV9 Network, in an exclusive interview earlier.
Who is the real David Cameron?
Well, that's for other people to decide. But what I would say is I came along after the Conservative Party had lost 3 elections in a row. I modernised the party. I put it back in touch with people. I managed to get new candidates, new energy, addressed issues like climate change, and managed to win the election in 2010 and then again in 2015. And our government, I think, did a lot of very good things for our country. And the legacy of those, particularly on things like climate, on getting the deficit down, getting the economy growing, promoting tech, all those things are still there. Obviously, the Brexit decision was a very important decision. We were trying to deal with an issue that I think had to be confronted. I obviously regret the result of it. I wish my side of the referendum had won.
If you want to get Britain out of ever closer union, if you want fairness between those in the euro and those out of the euro, and you want a more competitive and successful Europe, let's fight this together.
I made a promise of holding a referendum. We kept that promise. And the British people gave the answer that they wanted, and that's been delivered.
Yes, we would discuss about Brexit, obviously, a little later. But what we wanted to start off with, to know about what you think of yourself. Who's David Cameron? I mean, obviously, we know how we get reflected by outside people the audience, etc. But who do you think you are?
Well, I always describe myself as a modern, compassionate conservative. Modern because conservatives shouldn't be just about conserving what we have. We have to be looking forward, addressing modern challenges. Compassionate because my political philosophy is about helping everyone, particularly those who are left behind, who don't have the best life chances. But conservative because I think there are great things about our countries, whether we're in India or in the United Kingdom, that we should, institutions and things that we should want to promote and to keep. And using conservative methods, choice, competition, openness, these are things. So that's the sort of conservative I am. And I remain. Obviously, it's been more challenging, I think, in the Donald Trump populist world that we live in to hold by those values and that political approach, but I think it's more necessary than ever.
You are an Indophile. That's what we would like to think.
Very much so. I mean, when I became leader of the Conservative Party back in 2005, the first big country outside Europe I visited was India as leader of the opposition. And when I became Prime Minister in 2010, the first big country I visited outside Europe was again India. I came back and back and back because I'm a big believer in this partnership.
Absolutely.
David Cameron making his big political comeback in British politics. All right, that's all the time we have on this edition of Global Lens. If you have been, thanks so much for watching. Do join us again at the same time tomorrow.